Hey everyone, thanks for joining us. Let's see what we're going to be talking about today. We're going to be working on revenue, Domo apps, talking about how to set up your Domo systems correctly, looking at how it can help your whole company overall, but starting maybe crawl, walk, run in some cases some people talk about, or just ways to set up the data in advance so you can have more flexibility in the future. Just a quick agenda of what we're going to go through. Quick intro of the speakers, although it's mostly going to be Sam from Disney, because he's the one everybody really came to see. We're going to be talking about what's going on in the ad tech space overall, and the reasons why you should care and how the big data problems are being solved. And then Sam's going to go into all the stuff that's going on at Disney, and then we'll go a little bit into upcoming apps, some apps that we launched, as well as some updates coming forward as well. So, quick intro. My name is Dave Katz. I'm here at Domo. I'm a former customer. I used to be at Univision, where I ran programmatic ops and sales. And I just really fell in love with Domo, really changed the way I ran my business. And that's why I joined here. And Sam has been an amazing partner of ours over at Disney. Part of originally like the ABC family, but expanding beyond. He'll give a little more background on himself as well, but he's going to do the whole presentation in a little bit. I just wanted to provide some really quick background on what we're discussing and why it's a massive data problem. If you've seen this, raise your hand. Decent chunk of the room. This is a few years old already. A lot of these companies either don't exist or have been acquired. But it's just to give you an example of the ad tech industry, how sparse it is and how many different data sources there are. And a lot of companies work with basically one or two from each group there, if not more in some cases. But let's simplify it a little bit. Advertiser wants to get their ad in front of the audience. There are a few steps along the way. If you're a media company like Disney, you have the audience coming to your site, and then you need to run auctions that basically say, here's an audience member, this is what they're looking at, this is what they're watching, and we need to show an ad to them. Who wants to buy an ad? These auctions happen in hundreds of milliseconds, and in this case, while you can see like one ad exchange, one SSP, it could be dozens of them that a publisher is working with. And as they run all these auctions, think about a website when you load it. Let's say you load ESPN, probably on any given page, there's somewhere between 4 and 10 ads. You have an auction running for each one. In the basically second that it takes you to load the page, all these auctions fulfill, the highest bidder wins, and they serve the ad within those few hundred milliseconds. So the data is flowing through really quickly, but think about how many millions of visitors go to every single website with the number of ads that they all see, the number of pages that they're going through. You're talking about millions of rows a day for most publishers, billions of rows for some of the larger ones, and it just becomes a massive, massive data set. So with that background, I'm going to hand it off to Sam.
Thanks. I want to do another little audience participation situation. So media, ad tech, publishing, marketing, who's got that in their background? Quick show of hands. Cool. Okay, so won't adjust the lingo that much. Well, I'm happy to kick off what might be a little bit of a conversation. Those of you that are newer to Domo or looking to try to predictably drive better results in your projects. This is about kind of the breadth and the power of the Domo platform and putting that off to the side a little bit. It's called Put Your Stack on Rails. Quick disclaimer. So views, practices that I'm going to talk about here are mine, not necessarily reflective of the Walt Disney Company or any of my colleagues at Disney. You're going to see maybe some names, though I've tried to obfuscate data. All that stuff's directional. So really here in my capacity as a fellow professional, talking about some of my experiences. Dave mentioned a little bit about me already. So if you are, say, watching like Grey's Anatomy on a Roku, okay, and you're watching it, and then there's a commercial break, and then the commercials play, and then the content resumes. You've just had a wonderful experience. And if you'd like to know who to thank or perhaps blame for that, that team is where you're going to find me. So it's our ad tech team. Within all of that, I specialize in programmatic. Dave alluded to some of the data challenges that exist there. I'll unpack that a little bit more. And yeah, I'm Seattle-based. So what we're going to talk about is couple common pitfalls that I've seen in big data projects and how to mitigate those risks, which I call putting your stack on rails. I find that I can kind of break that down into 3 recommendations. One is to aim low, which I mean proximate goals. There's an extended field goal metaphor in there, which after seeing Drew Brees today, I'm very self-conscious about it, but I'll expand that to you. So proximate achievable goals. There's a lot of work you can do before you kick your project off formally or before you get Domo if you're a prospect. And then I've got a handful of Domo best practices that I think are really great for everyone. So to start off, we're going to expand that challenge in programmatic data just a little bit. So Dave was talking about how increasingly advertising is trying to transacting arm's length through intermediaries, right? We call these SSPs, supply-side platforms. And each of them, they typically are pretty robust platforms in their own right. They generate a lot of information, almost as much data as your primary ad server would. But again, because they're sort of removed, they're all making that data exposed. See, it gets me worked up thinking about it. They're exposing that data in different formats out there in different locations, right? They're speaking a different language. So we've got revenue, might be pub monetization, it might be estimated revenue for someone else, maybe there's a $ in it. So it's a little bit of a challenge just to stack all that information together. But the modern media professional needs to be able to do an apples to apples comparison. How is Amex buying me across all the different media that I've got? Or, hey, how is this reseller performing relative to that reseller? Should I allocate more opportunities in one direction or another? That was the challenge that led us to eventually work with Domo. And we've had some pretty good results so far. So this is just one thing that you're able to do, when you can do an apples to apples comparison. Maybe it doesn't look like much, but these are 2 news sites, 2 news publishers, right, within the world of Disney. And maybe a comparison that might make sense would be, okay, a car dealership, 2 car dealerships, same brand, same inventory, and similar demographic markets. They should perform about the same way. In exchange selling, a couple of news sites should monetize at roughly the same way. What we found by doing an apples-to-apples comparison is that this publisher, News B, is doing about 65 cents on the dollar to News A. Right? We were able to discover that. We went in, resolved the issues in the setup, so there was some markets that News B was not opted into. If you see later on in the graph, that spread tightens up a little bit. It's a 50% improvement in their monetization, maybe just a couple of days of work to figure that out. And that's yielding probably close to another $500,000 for us a year. And when you first get set up, right, it's an opportunity-rich environment. If you haven't been able to do this analysis before, there's a lot of money to go out there and pick up if that's your world. And I want to offer you kind of a framework to succeed as well, if you've got this kind of problem. So, it's more okay than you think to move the goalposts in. There's something about a big, powerful platform. All right, it's very exciting. When I was trying to build excitement for Domo internally at Disney, we talked about the breadth of what it could do. And so there were a lot of different projects we wanted to pursue. But I realized, we had a forcing function, let me put it that way, on my team. We needed to show some results within 30 days. So what we learned really was that narrowing down scope and taking care of something very proximate was a successful path forward. And it got me thinking about why maybe some of these larger projects tend not to go well. And I saw this happen with a number of other platforms, similar projects elsewhere. The 2 big risks are there are so many different things you could do that you kind of just go into experimentation, figure it out as you go mode, and you don't deliver results on time. Other risk, you can do everything, and it becomes the mother of all BI projects, the BI project to end BI projects, and then 6 months later, you're still scoping. So I'm not going to run through SMART goals. It's just something to be aware of. If you haven't used that tool before, we can talk about it afterwards. It's helpful. But there is just something about all this opportunity, all this power. It leads people to want to take moonshots. And sometimes moonshots are really, really exciting, right? So December 8th, 2013, Matt Prater of the Denver Broncos kicks the longest field goal in NFL history. It was 64 yards. And that's really exciting. Time's winding down in the first half. You say, we'll just go for it. It was a calculated risk. That's not really how I want to run projects, right? I don't want to take a big risk with sort of low consequences because nobody expects you to hit a 60-yard field goal. So these big, ambitious projects, they tend to go wrong, either take too long or cost too much or not deliver the anticipated value. And what I want to suggest is set yourself up to start hitting the field goals that should be automatic, the 30-yarders, right? Face the expectation of success. So when I say aim low and commit, that's what I mean. Here's how we got started on that for us. So we had been thinking about this for a while. We had to choose a project. We had to get results in 30 days. And one of our key issues, as I mentioned in programmatic monetization, is how do you know if one seller is performing well relative to another seller? So we focused in on that problem to start. So choose a problem. What was the metric that helps us answer our question? In this case, it's revenue per thousand. So given 1,000 units of inventory, how did this seller perform? And that takes us all the way down to the third point, which is, given your metric, how do you calculate it? In our case, there were 6 data points that we needed. We gut checked, we validated, we absolutely need these 6 data points. And the cool thing about this is it's all, consequential. It all happens on Rails. And it takes out the guesswork of what is your goal setting, what is your end result. So we validated our data model and we knew what we were aiming for. Okay. So I climb mountains sometimes. This is from a course that I was on last summer. We're just going over some rope stuff. There are people not in this picture. There are people that on expeditions, et cetera, usually maybe have to head down within the first day. And people that have done everything right, checked all the boxes. So you pay for the fee, you buy all the gear, you show up at the right place, but you didn't do the prep work right before the trip gets started. And sometimes I've seen, just as a project risk, okay, you've thought about the solution. You're going to climb a mountain. You're going to aggregate some data sets. Rather, you thought about the problem or your goal. And you realize the solution, right? You're going to buy gear. And once you identify, okay, we're going to get Domo, for example, to help us solve our problems, the planning stops once you've identified the solution. I want to say there's a lot you can do, right? While maybe you're still working things out with Domo sales, or maybe you're gearing up in your project cycle. And these are all actually really significant things. These are project risks, right? You've decided upon your goal, you know how you're going to get there, but you need to validate your assumptions. You need to acquire the data, you need to try out the work by hand. And if your assumptions are wrong, you need to plan all over again. And so if you're facing down that kind of work and you're waiting until you have access to a tool, for example, or you have funding, you're setting yourself up for a lot of risk later on. So why would you wait? So talking through a few of these things, while we were waiting, we worked with our sales team to get access to all the different sources of data that we wanted. Often this is just maybe a login, maybe it's setting up a report. Sometimes you need API credentials and it takes a while. As we were doing this, we were tracking it in a sheet so we knew how we were going to access the data. This created our roadmap for what we were going to set up in Domo once we got there. Again, puts things on Rails. As we get sample data, we start filling out a data dictionary. This is how we line up the columns that our third parties provide to us to our minimum viable data model. And to mix metaphors, this dictionary was our Bible. It was telling us exactly what we were going to do, where we were headed. And it takes out the guesswork. Lastly, we wanted to make sure that our project would actually deliver the results that we were aiming for. So given all of our sample data, given the mapping that we were going to do, it was then, I wouldn't say trivial, but it was a few hours to just do it by hand. Make sure we actually get to the right calculation. I say, in a sense, if you can, why would you not? My stakeholders, maybe they get a little bit tired of hearing me say it's very difficult to automate something. It's very challenging to automate something that you don't know how to do manually. But if you invert that, once you've already got the manual process, automation is close to trivial. You're just writing down what you're doing in a way that a computer understands. So to recap a little bit, you find a single problem, you boil it down into a calculation, you figure out how you generate that metric, you go out and do the prep work to make sure you can generate that metric. Now once you get access to Domo, you can just plug it all in, right? Well, a few good ideas for you first. Yeah. So I was feeling a little spicy when I put this together. Come with me if you want to live. But it is kind of existential. If the platform, if your Domo instance, for example, gets unmanageable, then it's going to become difficult to, well, its longevity is going to be at risk, right? Similarly, if you're taking care of the platform, if you're doing the right things, you're setting it up to be administered by people that come after you, you're setting yourself up to move on to bigger and better things as well. So great ideas. These aren't just good practices. These are pretty best practices. I like them. Here we go. First thing, naming conventions. Everything in Domo needs a name. If you're starting out, take 30, 60 minutes with your teammates, come up with a plan. It might even take like a fraction of time more to name stuff correctly, but I think actually not having to think about naming is even faster. So here's what we went with. So it tells you who the data is for, where it came from, what it represents, what its purpose is in the platform. It takes out a lot of the ambiguity. In fact, I would provide as feedback to Domo. Structuring and enforcing this in some way would be cool. Displaying long file names or object names would be cool. But until then, it's incumbent on all of you, right, as project leaders, to make sure you've got the discipline to follow this. Okay. Fault tolerance. Things go wrong. We all know that things go wrong, but things can go wrong in ways that surprise us, ways that we haven't planned for. And if you're not keeping an eye out for that, you've got maybe 2, 3 options, right? You can start all over every time somebody gives you really bad data. You can play whack-a-mole with all the things that could go wrong every time you identify an issue. Or you build in some fault tolerance so you can accept bad data and recover. So some of you, Domo may have shown you an example of this. It's their recursive data flow. I also think that there might be product updates coming out that will make this easier to do. But again, this is what we have on every single input across upwards of 30, maybe 40 different data sources. They go through a processing stage. The data is then ready to append. And then there is another sort of upsert flow, right, that adds new rows to kind of a master record. And what's cool about this is that there are these 2 or 3 recovery and breakpoints. So all of our data is coming in on a rolling 7-day basis. Any problem that is resolved within that period of time, fixed in the data stream, this just takes care of itself. Which brings us to the last bit. When do you know that you need to go in and manually intervene? So Domo's got a few different capabilities here that we're using for monitoring. Again, setting up self-monitoring from the start, really helpful. Domo stats, this is Domo describing itself. So a table or a flow, is it in error state? How big is it? When was it last run? And then we have a bunch of SQL-derived, mostly, queries that are looking for specific issues, duplicates, orphan rows, and other anomalies in the data. When I'm really busy, this dashboard is really the only thing that I check on to make sure that everything is flowing in a healthy way. And reducing the amount of work, I wanted to leave this in here, like reducing the amount of work is important to me as part of my kind of long-term professional goal to not have to work so hard. And so I really want to emphasize this, right, when it comes to best practices. The least possible work in a project is going to be doing it right the first time. So, as I mentioned, our results are pretty good. I've got a booklet of like half a dozen at least big wins, like the first one that I shared with you. We're continuing to find those every week. So those are kind of the tangible yield that's being derived from all of this. There's also less immediately measurable outcomes like time saved, money not lost because of rapid identification and resolution of issues. But yeah, in the end, it's not really about graphs, data processing. We've got a lot of graphs, we have a lot of information, but I think it's about becoming data-driven, right, as a business. So about empowering people. And there's this misapprehension sometimes that being data-driven is inviting a sort of narrow technocratic approach to how you run your business. But I think it's really the other way around, right? Data empowers people. Data turns guesses into experiments, allows people to speak a common language so that everyone can contribute to the organization. So, I'm happy, right, about the revenue that we found, but what brings me joy is when people do their day-to-day work using graphs, being data-enabled. And I think that's the real win. So with that, thank you. Bring Dave back on stage.
Thank you. Thanks, that was awesome. So, take photos, and let's go to the next part. Sam mentioned something earlier on which was really interesting about the massive data projects that a lot of companies take on and how they try to do everything at once, not necessarily an iterative process. And I think I've been at 2 or 3 different companies myself where I saw a data team put together a project plan that was going to take 24 months, and it usually dissolved in 6 to 12. And I think just doing it in a more iterative fashion, planning a little bit, but also, like Sam said, getting the goalpost to the right place where you can actually see results as quickly as possible is definitely going to help you with wins along the way and in the long run. That's what happened with me when I was a client, and that's also what's leading to what we're launching with apps, and in this case, the Media Suite. And I'll go into a demo of it, but just the quick story here was we realized that there were some very repetitive projects that our clients were doing. And I think when I first met Sam, we showed him a version of what I'm going to show you that we were using for a few other media companies out there. And we've actually launched more since then. I'll get into those. The interesting part is what we're doing is iterative as well. We've launched the start of these best practices, a way for companies to get launched much faster so they can get the wins immediately rather than waiting 6 months or even really 3 months. It should be in a matter of weeks. But then we take the feedback from the clients, and we have more coming as well. So all the things that we're talking about, it's a living and breathing suite of products and apps as well. So the really quick overview, and I'll breeze through these, what Sam did was combining all the revenue information. So this is the publisher side. If you are selling ads on your site, this is the best way to do it. We want to combine it. You want to be able to filter. You want to be able to understand where your revenue is coming from and how to increase it really quickly. We've had clients with success of seeing 100% lift in revenue by launching products like this. The flip side of it, and this we just launched about a month or 2 ago, is the programmatic buying. So this is for marketers and their agencies. The same thing that we're looking at on the sell side, now they're buying all the inventory and they want to know how their ads are performing. And earlier you saw what was the Digital 360 app, which is that CMO view, the marketing view of everything happening. And this specific app, which we'll show you, is built from a little bit of the bottom up. It's an operational view. The people who are pulling the levers day to day, what metrics do they need to see? What alerts do they need to get so that they can actually have everything flow through really nicely to the executives up above? And the newest thing that we launched is automated and custom campaign wrap-up reports, really helpful for publishers, for agencies, and we're going to have more coming as well. But why don't I jump into the demo? If we could swap that over. There we go. So this was the first one that we launched. This is the programmatic revenue app, and what we did was look at it from 2 different parts. What is the high-level view that you need to see? This is a custom app we built at the very top. Things that you might want to look at weekly, monthly, and send to your executives. And the nice part is it's customizable, and we can also basically change it for the goals that you have in mind. And something like this could be used for marketing or different aspects of your business, not just programmatic. But in this case, you're looking at which systems you're running with, which ones are bringing in revenue at any given moment. You see which ones are doing well per month, per quarter, per year based on your results. Everything down below, standard Domo, but out of the box, it just works really well and gets you all the metrics that you need. And all the back end, like Sam mentioned, it's really important to make sure that the naming conventions are done properly, specifically for the ability to do page level filters. So if I just want to look at everything right now and say, let's see how I'm doing only on my mobile inventory. Hit apply and everything refreshes right below. And if you're getting the similar data from each of these sources and you're able to connect it all in a very granular method, then you can add on additional filters. Mobile, video, how are we doing there? So as you can see, this is just really quick information for a publisher to launch and say, here's how I can change my business. And I'll actually go in a little bit and explain some of the options for how they can also grow revenue. The way we're thinking about it is there are 3 levels of what they need to get to. The first is, let's rebuild all the stuff that you do manually or you do in other systems. Let's just get that out of the way, that we have all the reporting in here on a daily basis so you just know what's going on in general. The next part is fixing the leaky bucket. figuring out where your issues are, where are there discrepancies. So I'll just jump to the bottom really quickly. Discrepancy reporting between systems, knowing not just at the system level, but down to like the creative ID or the placement ID, and understanding where the issues arise. Where, Sam was talking about those news sites. When you get granular level information, you can figure out exactly where the issues are coming from, issues that you didn't know about before, or that might have taken you weeks or months to figure out. But now you can fix the leaky bucket and usually be notified within a matter of hours, typically within 24 hours within these systems. And then on top of it, all of the future revenue growth. Where can I focus my energy? So in this case, what we built out, we actually paired up the left side and the right side. So the left side is the number of impressions, the scale that you can sell, and the right side is the CPM, the cost that you can sell it at, the rate that you sell it at. So if you look at where I should focus my sales efforts or where I should look into optimizing my systems and spending most of my time, starting with US, I broke this out into mobile, app, and desktop. Desktop CPM, really high. The incremental value of moving that up from $4.24 to $5, it's on a small amount of inventory compared to the rest in the US. Really, I should be spending my time on mobile app. There's no reason this $1.74 shouldn't get closer to that $2.49. And maybe I should put almost all of my sales efforts into mobile web to try and get it up to the same level as desktop. There's no reason while all of culture is going mobile first that it shouldn't be at the same rate. Canada, sad to say, there's not much inventory. Probably shouldn't spend too much time. But in EMEA, probably a good idea to hire somebody or to really get a few platforms to focus on the mobile side of it. So that's the programmatic revenue side, and we're iterating this, going to come out with quite a few more updates soon as well. And what we did also is we pre-built some alerts, pre-built filters on top of it, and as well, we're looking into machine learning capabilities, which are really fun. But all of the filters are there as well. Jumping into programmatic buying, this is kind of the flip side. So as a marketer, you're now spending money. You want to see how it's being spent. And while you saw the high-level marketer view, they want to see how everything's going. I'm talking about one specific function that's usually a small team of people are running at an agency or at an advertiser directly, where they're buying across hundreds or thousands of different publishers, and they need to manage it all. They, again, need to see what's going on. Each level of this dives deeper and deeper in order to get them to the most operational level. Pre-built filters, same as before, but really just saying, at the high level, am I pacing correctly? How much revenue have I spent? What do I expect to spend? Am I done with what I expected to do? And I can see my media plan here right away. Seeing how I'm trending with impressions. I won't necessarily go into all the metrics here, but happy to go into as much detail as you want if you have additional questions later. After impressions, we get into the cost, how am I spending, and then impressions and cost naturally lead to the number of conversions that you have. Why are my conversions trending downward or upward? What changes can I make? And let's get more granular, where are these conversions happening? Looking at funnel type metrics, clicks to views to conversions. And when you have all that together, now you can do calculated metrics, return on investment or return on ad spend or the actual cost per acquisition in this case. A lot of options there. And right here, this is a nice pretty data set, but you can see all the issues are coming from the desktop inventory. It's getting more and more expensive over time. Good chance to optimize. And when we get to optimization, we want to talk about the audiences, getting a level further, and what's going on with them, who's seeing what, are ads actually showing up on the screen, what can we do to optimize this aspect of it. We have a lot of breakouts built in, but you can also do filters on top of it. And then finally here, discrepancies. I showed you an example before on the programmatic sell side, but on the buy side, we even get a little more granular, and we're going to be adding a lot of these types of metrics to basically all of the systems that we're doing with marketing. I think it's really important to know exactly where the issues occur as soon as they occur, and we have notifications on top of this as well. The last thing I want to show you before we get to questions is the wrap-up report. So this is a more visually stylized report that we've seen a lot of our clients do. So it's publishers, agencies, ad tech companies. Whenever they have an advertiser come to them, they provide reporting at a base level, typically in Excel. They just email it. But on top of that, they will sometimes do for the biggest clients some custom reporting that's either just done in PowerPoint, they copy and paste metrics in, they copy and paste some images in. But with our new storytelling features, we have the ability to add images in. You could copy and paste screenshots, and you can have data flow in, all the live data flowing in as you're going. You can send them links, but you can also export this to PDF, PowerPoint, or external options as well. You can always embed it into a system too. But the nice part is this has data flowing through in an automated way, really the majority of the work being done there, but allowing for the custom creative on top of it. We can alter text sizes, we can have data flow into the text, and just a lot of customizability with the sizing. Really nice when you want to show difference of performance by ad options there. So if we can go back to the presentation. So coming soon, I kind of talked about it a little bit, but a lot of it is about getting feedback from our clients in order to figure out what we want to build going forward. But we're also brainstorming a lot based on just being out in market. We hear what's happening over and over. We've talked a lot about programmatic advertising, but Sam also talked about direct business as well. Some of the things we'll be coming out with are basically across the whole media landscape for marketers, for publishers, and basically everybody in the middle to help run their businesses. So we're going to have additional functionality and a bit more robust around ad operations. But everything you saw earlier as far as new releases with machine learning, with AI, is planned to be built into these systems as well. We want to get a lot more predictive with the apps that we come out with. So Sam, do you want to come back up here in case people have questions for either of us? Most likely for you. If you have a question, just raise your hand and we'll send the mics around.
First, is all the publisher side data, does that come from DFP or GAM? Or
All the publisher data, it really depends on the publishers we're working with. Okay. So the majority of them do use the Google ad servers. We do have some clients on Freewheel. Some have both or had both. And then a lot of the revenue is coming from each of the individual sell-side platforms they work with.
So how do you deal with data governance from all the different supply-side platforms that you get access to? I know that some supply-side, they'll give you country, others will not. Some will give you apps, some will bucket that into mobile. How do you deal with cleaning up all that data?
A lot of it comes, it's a mix of the data that they provide. So obviously the more granular, the better. But it could also be in the naming conventions from the creative tags that we can match up as well. If we do not get enough granular information from the sell-side platform, we'll sometimes go back and ask, and it's usually the publisher who asks in order to get it. But if we can get down to log level data, that's like the most, that's the best thing we can get, because then we could rebuild all of the other stuff too. But we have a few workarounds. In most cases, the systems that don't provide granular information are typically not the main systems in place, and they're usually just doing a sliver. Like we know this one is just mobile only. That being said, I think a lot of the companies out there could do better as far as reporting more granular information. Yeah, I think there's one back there.
Yeah. So if you're on the BI side, what are some tips to kind of, like this is great, and I work for a publisher, but we're not on the ad op side, and we're not in the yield management side, we're on the BI side. So what are some tips for kind of selling this for an ad ops or yield, like a revenue department that has their own processes, that has their own kind of ways of visualizing this data? So.
I'm right there with you, actually, as we try to find more applications. One of the things that's very close to me right now is using this for operational monitoring. So we have a very, I would say, obvious customer, right, in our sales team, because we say, more money is better than less money. But with ad operations, for example, you need to find a way, and that's going to resonate with them. And for me, what I've been trying to get at is that fewer mistakes are better than more mistakes. And so how can we set up or prove some cases that show, okay, we were able to identify something going wrong before we had 7 days of no delivery. So I think as a general thing, like figure out what's valuable, what's meaningful. If you're making a run at another system, that's maybe a little bit outside of me, but that's why Domo's got a team. And also getting access to data it's a barrier you got to get over. I think it's actually a real strength of Domo that it's so easy to put something in when you get a sample, and it makes it very possible to create cases right before you fully automate something.
Yeah, the quick thing I would say is, I don't know if you're a customer or not yet, but even if you aren't, just getting a demo account and being able to throw in some exports from the systems and showing that to the teams, I find works really well. I think we do that a lot, right? With our proof of concept for a lot of our clients, we'll pull in a few of the data sets and we'll say, this is what you could imagine it looks like if you put everything in. But from an I was in your shoes also, and I think from an internal consultative perspective, it's about finding out where are they at right now, and maybe you know the answer of where they need to be, but you need them to kind of help. You have to get them to that point. So showing them some of the data gets them asking questions more than you saying, hey, do you look at your discrepancies every single day? I've done that before. They don't take kindly to it.
Hey, how are you doing? I was wondering, do you have a QA process when you look at the data that's in Domo compared to maybe the UI?
Compared to the UI of like the SSPs themselves?
Correct, yeah.
Yeah, we've taken a few iterations, right? So everybody had a pre-existing reporting process, which is what made it achievable to do this so quickly. And so we did resolve over time several occasional discrepancies that would come up because, okay, here's a wacky one, right? So we had a PMP, we had a deal running in one third party that was transacting through yet another third party, and they were both recording the revenue. And so sales says, why are we double counting here? I'm like, well, they both put the data in there. So, okay, now we have to go and put in a process to, try to take that point out. So yes, there's a QA process. It means partnering with the people that know the data the best so you can identify where those issues are.
Awesome, thank you.
Cool. Is there any others? All right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all.